Hello guys, Cracker here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to use the Bricks Nestable tab to create a tab that switches to accordion on mobile. And not just that, it's going to be keyboard accessible. So this is what we're going to be doing. Hopefully it's not going to take too long. So what I'm going to first of all do is to tap through these tabs. Okay, I'm going to use the keyboard and tap. This is tab 1, and then we have a title here that is a link, and then I'm going to tap in. You see it jumps in there, and then I'm going to tap again. It moves to the second tab, enter key, move inside. Once it finishes with all the link, you tap. Now if I tap without pressing enter, it's going to jump to the next tab. It's not going to go into the tab that is hidden. Okay, you see, so that is exactly what we're doing here. All right, so now I'm going to change to mobile, and you can see that all that collapses into an accordion. So we see the tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, tab 4. So all of them collapse, and it is just a really smooth animation, and it is still keyboard accessible, just in case for any reason someone wishes to use the keyboard to, there's anything that simulate the keyboard like that on mobile. All right, so to do this, we're going to jump to Bricks. So what I'm going to do is to add a section, and then in that section, in the container, I'm going to add the tabs, and we're going to use the nestable tabs. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to restructure these tabs. Let's take a look at this. We have the tabs, the tab menu, and the tab contents. Then this is the tabs, and this is the tab, the content pane. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly delete this first one, and then I'm going to delete this one also. So we're going to have one on each. I'm going to rename this to tab, and then this is still going to be pane. Now what I want to do is to make sure that this and these are siblings. So I'm just going to move these over here, and they are going to be siblings. Just drop it there, and I'm going to delete this. I'm going to give this a class, the tab. I'm going to call it my tab, and then I'm going to give this a class. I'm going to call it my tab pane. Now the next thing I want to do is I will come here. Now right inside this pane we need two divs. The first one is going to be the inner wrap, and then I'm going to drop in a div there. I'm just going to call that inner wrap, and then I'm going to give that a class. I'm going to just say my tab pane inner wrap, and then now that inner wrap is going to be responsible for the mobile collapsing on the mobile, so we need that, and then we need another div to wrap the content. So I'm just going to wrap this with a block. So anyway, my picture is covering that. Let me just drop this in, and then I'm going to move this text in here. I'm just going to say content wrap. Now that is the structure we need to be able to build this the way I want to build it. Now it's just a little sacrifice to add just one or two more divs, but it doesn't really mean much. Okay, now I'm just gonna call this my tab pane content wrap. Inside here, I'm just gonna take this off and add a heading, and that heading I'm just gonna call it title, okay, or my title. Inside there, I'm gonna add an image, and then that image is gonna be just one of these images. Just gonna drop that in. Now I have just one tab, and I'm gonna call that tab 1, okay, or 1, number 1. And then let's see, now I'm gonna duplicate this to the number of times, like say 4 times. So I'm gonna duplicate this. For each tab I duplicate, I have to duplicate the pane, and then I have to alternate them. Like I'm gonna move these here. Okay, so I have tab 1, this is gonna be tab 2. And for this, now it is not showing. Now let's save this and go to the front end and see what is going on first of all. So I have this tab 1, tab 2. Okay, so because they are side by side, this is how they are showing. Okay, no problem. Okay, let's finish. Now I'm gonna just duplicate this again, and this is gonna be tab 3. All right, and then I'm gonna duplicate this. So the tab 3 is going to be, I'm going to move it here. Remember, they have to alternate. Okay, so one more time, I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to call this tab 4. And I'm going to duplicate the pane. So for each tab you duplicate, you have to duplicate the pane. So I move this here. Okay, so we have tab and pane, tab and pane, tab and pane, tab and pane. So we have 4 of them. Save that, and then we see we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go ahead and change my image. So for each of them, now I don't want my tab to be too large to fill the screen like this. So I just want to reduce it a little bit. so that we can see everything in the screen. So I'm going to give it a maximum width of, let's say, 800 pixel. And then for the container here, I just want to centralize that tab. Yep, I think so. Let's see. All right, so you see small enough to fit the screen so we can see everything at once. So I have my title there. Now for that title, I think I would just make that a link. Okay, so I'm going to make that link to dynamic data, and then I want to link to this post title. Now I'm just going to copy this and paste here while deleting these ones. Just replace the one that doesn't have a title. That's basically all I'm doing. All right, so I'm going to save that again, check the front end just to be sure. You see it is a link. So right now my tabs they're ready, you know, it's showing, okay, but it's not displayed properly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to go now, let's collapse all of this and then open this again. Now the tab menu, what I want to do now is to come to this tab menu and set it to display as grid. And now for the grid row, so I'm displaying it as grid. Nothing really is happening here. If I come back here, we can see that, of course, see it's displaying, but then this is not how we want it to be on the desktop. So we're going to configure it for the desktop. Now for the grid template columns, I want it to be 4 because we have 4 tabs. So I just want it to be, I want to use repeat. Now I'm going to say 4, 1 FR. Now we're going to go to the front end and then we're going to look at it. So we have this. They are side by side. That's why it's showing like this. So for this pane, I want the grid column to be to span all the 4 so that it doesn't show like this. I want it to span all the 4. So I'm just going to make it, the grid column is going to be 1 divided by 1, -1. That means it should span. Now it's not really showing here in the builder. I'm not quite sure why it should. Yeah, right now it's showing, refreshing that. So now if I delete that, you see, this is how it is. But if I do 1/1 -1, it means span the whole width. So it doesn't matter how many rows, how many columns it is, span the whole column. Okay, all of the columns. So I'm going to save this, and you see it's spanning all of the columns. So if I click this, click this. Now what is happening here is that it is spanning all of the columns. Like even this is spanning all of the column. You can see that this is just the image, but the tab itself. Now let me give it a background. This pane, I'm just going to give it a background color. Just going to choose a background color for it, something bright like that. Okay, so let's save it again. So you see that it spans the whole of, you see this image is just small. It spans the whole of it. Okay, but now the problem is that this pane comes before this. It takes up, now it is not enough to fill in here. It moves to the next row and then pushes these other ones down. So the same thing happens here. Now when I click this, the one that is next to this fills the row, but there's enough space for 2. So these 2 enters. Okay, if I click this, there's enough space for 3. If I click this, there's enough space for 4. Now what I want is a situation where all of them all the ones that can fill up this space fills up this space, irrespective of the position that it is in the DOM. So the way we can do that is to use what is called the grid autoflow. Now this is the grid autoflow. So we're going to set the grid autoflow to we have 3 options: row, column, and dense. We're going to set it to dense. That dense is going to make all the grid columns that can fill in the available space to jump in and fill that available space, irrespective of their positions in the DOM. So that is going to give us a tab the way we want it to be on the desktop. Now the next thing I want to do is to change these tabs to buttons. Right now, if I use the keyboard, I can't navigate it with the keyboard. By default, the Bricks tab is not a keyboard navigable. So to make it keyboard accessible, to be able to navigate with the keyboard, what I want to do is to go into the tabs and change the tags to button. So I'm going to come here and change the tags to button. Come here, change the tags. I should have done that, you know, before, so I don't have to write this several times. Change the tags to button. And when you change the tags to button, it automatically, you know, becomes keyboard accessible and will receive keyboard focus. Now let's save that, see the front end and see how it looks. It still works as we expect, but right now if I hit the tab key, you can see that it takes keyboard focus. Okay, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and just style that. Now let's go back to the tab nestable, and then we're going to style this from the parent here. So the content title, content. Now what I want is the active background. I want to change the active background to that color, and then the active typography, I want to change it to white. Have that. But the overall typography, I just want to bolden it. Okay, maybe centralize something. So let's see. The typography, the regular typography, I want the weight. I want to give it a weight, okay, of let's say 600. Fonts opens. Okay, so everything is just bold. Good. And I think I would like to centralize that. Now, this will mean I will have to select this tab. So we don't have options here because it's displayed as block. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into the text. Of course, we did not give the text a class. So I'm just going to give that text a class. I'm just going to say my tab title. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in. Now let's focus on this first one. I want to set all of this to auto so that it will just automatically align to the center. And it doesn't look like it's happening because that should be because the text align also needs to be centered. All right, so I'm going to copy the style from there and paste it on this other text. We should paste the class. So what happens that it pastes that class. So now we have this. So I want to give this tab a peel shape. So I'm going to go into, make sure that my class is selected. I'm going to go into border. I'm going to go into border radius, and I'm going to give it a 50 VW. 50 VW, give it a peel shape. I've been asked before why I like using 50 VW instead of 50%. Now, if I give it 50%, this is how it's going to look. See how it looks? 50%. So I don't want that. I want 50 VW. Okay. Let's save this, and we need some gaps in between, and because of how we have arranged it, we can use a gap property. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to use a margin property. So I'm going to go to layout, I'm going to go to margin and just give it maybe 1 rem margin all around, and that is going to just give space all around it. Okay, but I want to quickly come in here to this breakpoint, and I think it is at this breakpoint that we want our tabs to collapse into accordion, and then I'm going to take off those margins from there, and then I'm going to take off the borders. Okay, so I'm going to just go to border radius. I'm going to make it 0, and let's leave it as the default. Save that. Okay, so let's go back to the front, and now we have this. So what I want to do is to give the paddings on the inside. Now, the pane, you cannot, what you're going to do is make sure you don't have any padding in your pane. So let's go in and make sure that there's no padding in the pane. Okay, there's no padding there. This pane, this is supposed to be inside the inner wrap, the content wrap. So I'm just going to move it in. That was an oversight. Okay, so for each of this pane, I'm going to just move that that content wrap inside the inner wrap. Okay, do that. That was an oversight. So let's take a look at the front end again and see how it looks. So no change, everything looks the same. Now we want to give a padding. Now the padding, you don't want to give that padding on the inner wrap. You want to, that's why we had the content wrap, because of the padding. Now, so if you give it on the inner wrap, our collapsible accordion is not going to work properly because of the padding. Unless we use CSS to remove the padding, you know, but it doesn't really make sense to make it like, do it like that. This is kind of like a foolproof way to deal with it. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to give it a padding of, let's say, 2 rem. All right. So I have that padding, and then I want to give a row gap of, let's say, 2 rem. And then let's see. All right. So we have that working properly, and let's go to mobile and see. So on mobile, you can see that we still have the tabs like a tab. You can see this is already wrapping, you know, onto a second line. You want it to be accordion. So what we're going to do is, when we come to this breakpoint, we're going to go back to that tab menu where we had a grid template columns to be repeat for 1FR, and we're just going to say 1FR. We're going to change it to 1FR, and when we change it, you see it's going to change to accordion. Now we want to focus on how to make it smooth, because right now there's no transition of any kind. So what we're going to do is, let's go in. We have to write a little bit of CSS to make that happen. So I'm going to go to the pane, and then we're going to start writing the CSS. So for the grid pane and at this breakpoint, I'm going to go to the CSS section, and then I'm going to write root, root, and then open close. The first thing we want to do is to set it to display as grid. And let me collapse every other one. because I wanna show you something. Now let me open this. Okay, let that stay open because I want to reference something there. Now notice that inside here we have an inner wrap. Now we want that inner wrap to collapse. For that inner wrap to collapse, you want to set the grid template rows to 0 FR. Now this is not going to collapse, of course, because it is already active. Okay, but let's continue. Now I want to point out that now by default these grid are set to display none or block. So for us to override that, I would need to add important here. Okay, of course there are ways we could use other selectors to enhance the specificity, but we just want to focus on the functionality of this for now. I'm going to set the overflow to hidden, and then I'm going to give it a transition of 0.2, let's say 0.3 seconds. Now you can see that all of them are displaying. You can see they're all displaying. Okay, now if I remove that important, see it did not display, and we want it to display. Okay, now I'm going to target the div inside there. I'm going to say root first div inside, because the structure always has to be like that. So we select the first div inside. I'm going to make sure that no matter what, the padding on that first div is always 0. Even if someone mistakenly add that, it's always 0. And we're going to give it a transition of 0.2 seconds or 2.5. And then we want the visibility to be hidden. Now the reason I want the visibility to be hidden is because by default the bricks tab that is not active is set to display none. Once it is set to display none, you can't have keyboard focus inside anything in it. But because we are forced it to display grid, now if we don't set the visibility of the inner div to hidden, we will be tabbing into it even though it is not active. So we want to avoid that. So that's why we want to have visibility hidden. We're going to write the CSS for the active. So that's going to be root.brx open, because Bricks adds a class of brx open to the tab to make it active. Display grid. Going to make that important too. Then we're going to set the grid template rows to 1 FR. Now all these are supposed to collapse because of the grid template rows, but let's look at the front end and see what happens. So they are open. You can see they're open, but the grid template rows of like this one is open, but the second one is not supposed to be open. We have a grid template row of 0 FR. That means they're supposed to collapse. So let's see what is going on here. So we have this overflow is set to hidden. Let's move to the next one here. The div. Let's check the overflow hidden. Okay, so we need to set overflow to the div inside. All right, you can see what happens now. So we're going to set overflow hidden to the inner div, which is this. So we're going to have overflow hidden too there. So you can see that they collapse. Now let's look at something. Now when we have a grid template row of 0, it collapses, but if I remove that, you can see it expands. So that grid template row of 0, make sure that it just brings the height down to 0. But when it is active, we want to set it back to 1, the grid template rows to 1, and it will set the height back to auto height. And this is a very nice way of animating the height instead of using maximum height, because normally we usually use maximum height to animate the height, but this is a better way because it's actually animated to the real height instead of animating to a projected maximum height of say like 1000, which usually makes the animation to be inconsistent depending on the content inside the the div. So now when this open, we're going to target the inner div also. Bricks open, brx open the inner div, and then we want to set the visibility to visible. If I save this, you can see now that this closes. Okay, visibility is visible. Now let's try the tabbing. When I tap here, tab and enter. If I tap here, now if I tap again, it's not going to enter inside the content. You can see it move to the next div, move to the next tab. So everything is keyboard accessible, the desktop, and then you can see that that works. So it seems we're basically done with that. So I'm just going to come back here and take off the background from these. Okay, so let's save that, go to the front end, look at it, we have a tab, and then when we switch to accordion to mobile, it switches to accordion. Okay, so that's all about creating an accessible tab that switches to accordion on mobile. So go ahead and hit the thumbs up if you found this video useful. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other videos I'm going to be bringing your way. And I look forward to seeing you again. Have a great day.